All right, everybody. It's that time of the week. It's that time of the night. This is Real Talk Live with Bishop Bright. Listen, if you thought last week was good, this week is fire. So I hope you're ready to get involved, to join us, to get going. Let me make sure that I can get all of your comments to come in. That's what I was trying to say. Give me just a sec. Let me make sure I edit here so that I can get your privacy settings going. And we are ready to get started. Let's bring back our crew from last week. We are coming in. Let's see. We have Bishop Foreman from Denver.
What's going on, Bishop?
Hey, Bishop. How's it going, man?
You know what? Listen, I'm good. Looking forward to our discussion today.
All right. We also have Pastor Eric Jones from Austin.
What's up, Bishop?
Hey.
Yo. Bishop Foreman, how you doing, man?
Listen, man, that's all.
Yes, sir.
We also have Mr. Quentin Tyus.
How y'all doing?
All right.
They look like he in the studio getting ready to make an R&B album. Come on,
All right.
come on here. I love it.
And then we have Mr. Derek Lewis.
Hello, everyone.
All right,
doing, sir?
Lewis?
So doing great.
We're all here. Are you ready? Are y'all ready for this? Come on. Tell me, are you ready for this? Because it's about to go DOWN tonight. Listen, before we get started, I want my friend Bishop Foreman. Bishop Foreman, will you pray for us tonight?
Yes, sir. I will absolutely do that, but I got to be honest. I'm going to need that picture up off of Derek. That picture right behind him with that gold in it. I'm going to need that up off of you. So you can send it or I can just come on down.
You can't be wanting that.
Y'all got a lot going on.
Listen, we got to hit a prayer first. Let's see if you know the Lord.
Listen, I ain't got to know the Lord. Hey, now listen, that does not require knowing. Father, we bless you. We honor you, sir. We thank you for this time tonight. We commit our conversation into your hands. We pray that ultimately you would get the glory out of everything that we do. Bring clarity, bring courage, and also bring conviction where necessary tonight. So we give you glory in advance for this discussion. And ultimately, Father, we pray that people would give their lives to you. You said in your word that you wish above all things, Father, not only that we would prosper, but you wish that all men would be saved. So tonight, draw people from the north, south, east, west, every background, every pedigree, and bring them to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thank you. Listen, so last week, we started talking about this church hurt. And when we talked about it last week, I think we had a lot of discussion, but we didn't bring, I don't think, a lot of clarity. And I want us to really focus on a workable definition. And then I want to do something differently tonight than how we did it last week. I really want to kind of have almost, and this was a suggestion from Jones, almost like a town hall. I want to give everybody the opportunity to add something to the question. So I want us to be mindful. Also, we have another guest coming online. Everybody say hello to Bishop Thomas.
Shalom, good evening,
everyone. Hello.
Good evening.
So, church hurt. We talked about it in all of these different ways. Is it the preacher, pastor, leader hurting people? Is it people hurting people? Is it a combination?
Am I the only one that can't hear Bishop?
Huh?
I can hear him.
You can. Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
You can. Okay.
Okay.
Right. It's just me that can't hear.
And
y'all.
can everybody hear them? I mean, not hear them. Is it people and leaders and pastors and elders and all of those folks hurting people? Is it people hurting people, or is there a combination of it? Listen, right now, before we get into the discussion, I want you to like, to share, to comment. Let me know where you're coming from, and start watch parties. Do all of that, because folks need to hear what we're talking about tonight. So here we go. Is it one, the other, combination. And I think right off the bat, I think that there are real instances where people who are involved in church and ministries are genuinely hurt by either other people or by leadership. And at the same time, though, regardless of where it comes from, leadership has some responsibility on some level to suss it out if it's brought to them, as well as to deal with it if it's brought to them. So, my question, we lost you for a minute there, Bishop, but I think we got you back, Bishop Foreman. Bishop, can you hear me?
I see him.
Something happened.
He
I don't
went
know.
black.
He'll get back on in a minute. So, what I want each of you to do first is tell me how you define church hurt. And Jones, you at the top of my screen, so we'll kick it off with you.
Well, in the simplest of terms, I would define church hurt as an episode where something happened to someone personal, and when someone got something from the church that they wasn't expecting to get in a form of any type of hurt and or disappointment, because it just seems like I believe that when people go to the church, normally in some cases they're going to something because they're trying to escape something. And I think in most times people end up finding the very thing in the church that they were just trying to escape. And I think any type of episode or any type of hurt, any type of disappointment can be defined as church hurt. And I think it's relative to who it is. I think it's relative to who it is and what's been done.
All right, Bishop Thomas, you take the question.
I think it's easy to really direct church hurt to people and personalize it, because we usually have to have somebody to attach to our pain. But I really think that church hurt has been primarily the product of falsified expectations. I don't think the expectations have been clearly set as far as people's purpose for when they come to the church. It's either they're coming for the wrong reason, the wrong thing, they're attached for the wrong reasons, the wrong things. And so consequently, they develop the wrong expectations. And it operates on both sides. Pastors start relying and depending too much on people, and people start relying and depending too much on the personality or the person of the pastor, rather than the objective that they really need to come for. And that's really teaching people to love God. Because, when we're doing something for the right reason, it eliminates a lot of the wrong expectations. And then we don't get caught up in so much stuff that we typically find ourselves getting caught up in. But I do think as well as that, as an addendum, is that there's a lot of hurt, but a lot of times it gets indicated on one side where the parishioners are quick to assign their hurt to the pastor. And as Pastor Jones said, they come there hurt and they never really allowed themselves to get healed. And so they attach for the wrong reasons. Then they need somebody to blame, and the pastor becomes the most convenient person to point the finger at. And a lot of times we're not even understanding that pastors are equally as hurt by people as people are by pastors sometimes.
All right, and I want to address some of that, but I want to give everybody the shot. Bishop Foreman.
I can't hear you, Doc.
I can't hear you.
He's on mute.
We can't hear you, sir.
Oh, he's on mute. Now
We still
Bishop,
can't
still
hear.
on.
It's still
He's
showing
on
like
mute.
you're on mute.
He's muted.
He really tough.
He's muted on the screen, sir.
Yeah, you're muted, Bishop. Can you unmute yourself?
On your screen.
It's still showing you
We can't
muted.
hear you.
now.
You muted
Oh,
on
there
your
you go.
screen.
There you
Okay,
go.
now it shows. All right.
There it is.
All right, there's some type of connectivity issue because I was muted. I hit mute to unmute and now I'm unmuted. Okay, so
We can hear
I
you.
don't know, some type of connectivity issue. My apologies, everybody. Listen,
No problem.
I would agree with this. I think hurt comes more often than not in church because of a misplaced expectation. I think the reality is when we just look at the simple definition of the word injury, an injury can come many times, I think, number one, because of misplaced expectations. Number two, injury can come because of misplaced motives or misplaced agendas. If I didn't come for you, it's going to be very difficult for you to injure me in a way that is nefarious in nature to where I carry that hurt with me. And then I would say thirdly and finally, I think that hurt often also occurs because one, sometimes it's friendly fire. Sometimes in the hustle and bustle of life, human beings sometimes can injure human beings, and it's not intentional, but sometimes that can happen. So,
All right. Now I've
That's
heard
my
from the
definition.
pastors. Let's go from non-pastors. Derek.
I like the word misplaced expectations. However, I would argue that those expectations, although they are misplaced, are justifiably misplaced. I think that for me, church hurt is when a person is victimized by a person whom they have placed their trust in. Perhaps they shouldn't have, but I think to say, well, it's based upon their false expectations is sort of victim blaming. And it's a way of sort of putting that off onto the victim instead of the person that is actually the victimizer.
All right. Q.
Overall, I like what everyone said. I guess the only thing I can add or put footnotes into that, even with Pastor Jones talk about hurt and disappointment, I think that is the standard of, real church hurt is disappointing in some aspect. Bishop Thomas and Bishop Foreman also talked about falsified expectations, and I agree with that. Now, my side note to that is either how did those false expectations come about? Did the person come into the church with false expectations? Were those expectations given to them incorrectly? Or third, if those expectations are false, did the church do its part to redirect and properly cultivate them to have the right expectations? So those are all things that you have to ask anytime somebody has false expectations.
All right.
Simplest, I'm sorry, real quick. Simplest, I think people get hurt by the people they're closest to. So in a lot of instances, if your relationship is closest to your pastor, that's the person that can hurt you the most. If it's the mother of the church or some other family, those are the people who you're closest to or closest connected to are the people that you can be hurt by the easiest. And I think the most important thing is church hurt comes from how issues are handled. When issues come about, which they always will, if they're handled incorrectly, that's where that hurt lingers and it turns into something else.
All right. Now we're past that. I think we got a good base definition. There was something that Bishop Thomas said, and I think you all kind of mentioned your some level of agreement to it. But I do want to ask about this comment. Bishop Thomas said sometimes people come to the church injured, right? Would we agree that even if that is the case, that there are times when in church those injuries are re-injured as opposed to being hurt? Does that be fair?
Yes.
To say?
Yep. I agree.
Okay, so here's my first question that I really want us to think. If someone came to you and said to you, man, I have been hurt at this church that I'm in, and you're in that church or you're in another church, it doesn't matter. They came to you and said, I'm hurt by the church that I'm in, Bishop Foreman, what's your response to them?
You're back on mute.
Oh, we got those connectivity problems again.
He's muted again. There you go. There you go.
He's like, I'm not muted.
How about now?
There you are.
You're
Yeah,
good.
there you go.
See, I'm muted. When I click to mute myself, then it unmutes. It's the craziest thing. So I'll swap devices. Bishop, can I ask you to ask the first part of the question again? I apologize for the connectivity issue.
If somebody came to you
go
and
again?
said, I have been hurt by the church that I'm in, how do you address them? What do you say to them? What do you do?
So first thing you got to do, like any good physician, is you have to give a diagnosis before you can give a prognosis. So what happened? Tell me what happened. Let's go level by level, situation by situation. Tell me what it is that happened. Oftentimes when we begin to examine hurt, we realize that much hurt is self-inflicted. Self-inflicted wounds, Jeremiah says it like this. He said, David says it like this. Both of them actually say, he says, my wound is foul and it's festering. And he says, I got to bear it. The reality is that sometimes those wounds are self-inflicted. So what happened? Tell me what happened. Walk me through the situation. Are you hurt or are you angry that you didn't get what you expected? Got it? Which created a sense of hurt. But the reality is that there can be an expectation issue. One of the comments that was made earlier about victim blaming. The problem when you start using terms like victim is that that's a relative term, often based on a false premise. Donald Trump thinks he's a victim. He thinks everything that happens to him is unfair because his sociopathic narcissism makes him believe that anything that doesn't go his way means he's been victimized, right? And so the danger about using a term victim is that if you don't have all of the facts, you can't assign who's the victim in a situation unless you've got both parties. And then even then, you're only going to get perception, not reality. So to your point, my question would be, tell me what happened, walk me through it, and let's see what really happened. Were you hurt or just angry that you didn't get what you wanted or expected? Were you hurt or is it that you are simply a person that always finds yourself in the seat of the victim? Jezebel thought she was a victim too, but she was the greatest victimizer of all.
Bishop Thomas.
Well, I kind of want to back up just a little bit to what you first said regarding re-injury, because typically re-injury occurs more often than not when a previous injury hadn't been dealt with or totally addressed. And I think when Bishop said about the prognosis, there's a term said necessity is the mother of invention. A lot of times it's the necessity of the churches, the pastors, the leaders, to need help so bad that we put hurt people or injured people in positions without clearly defined lines, which again goes back to expectations. We don't understand what to expect from them or them to expect from us, because in the prognosis state of it, I don't think we're doing a sufficient job in realizing who we're dealing with. As Bishop said, so we're not diagnosing them at the beginning. We bring them in, we give them one perspective, which is we have new membership classes that typically are designed to outline the beliefs and the parameter systems of the church, but never really sitting down and diagnosing each person for where they're at, because you need to know that before you put people in position, because hurt people continue to hurt other people.
And you know what? And thank you for saying that. But then my question kind of on top of that, and I know I'm not being fair yet to the rest of the guests, but I do, and Jones is itching. I'm gonna get to you, Jones. Hold on. But my question is, but don't leadership kind of bear the blame for that if they don't properly suss out people before we put them in position?
I think it goes to the whole church as we have structured it, and I'm talking particularly the minority church, because the boundaries which we have to operate in are slightly skewed to the boundaries that a lot of Caucasian churches operate in, because they have the resources. You can deal with people differently when they're staff and when they're volunteers, even though I know the expectation should be the same. But Bishop said something about the reality. Yeah.
All right, Jones, you biting your lip and going on. Come on.
Okay, so first of all, I think Bishop Foreman is right. I think you have to diagnose the situation. That's number one. And then you got to figure out. So when I was in high school, whenever we told our coach that we were injured, he would always want to make sure he diagnosed us. So his response was, "Are you injured or are you hurt? If
Are
you're
you
injured,
what?
you cannot play. Are you
Keep
injured or are you hurt?
Okay.
So
Okay.
if you're injured, you cannot play. But if you're hurt, you just got to suck it up, right? And I think a lot of people that are dealing with church hurt, right, are really just like hurt but not really injured. And it's kind of like what I said last week. Sometimes we confuse church hurt with finish hurt. And I think that's the danger. That's like, and I've experienced that so many times. People claim that it's church hurt, but it's really not church hurt. It's just like you got hurt by somebody else, you know? And so I think we ride this church hurt thing for too long. Now, here's what I really want to get to. What I really want to get to is this. Last week, I felt like we had a whole bunch of talk but no solution, right?
Right.
And so, and just for the record, Bishop Foreman, when I got this meeting last week, I called Bright. I said, Bishop Foreman is my dude, right? But what I hear a lot of, right? And I want us to be transparent, real, and accountable. What I hear a lot of tonight is a bunch of them, but not us.
Thank you.
Right?
Okay.
And so we have all these definitions of how they are hurt, how they came hurt. Well, we're pastors. We should expect them to come hurt, right? God expects shepherds out of his shepherds. He expects sheep out of his sheep, right? And as shepherds, we ought to be used to dealing with hurt sheep, right? But I think a lot of times is where you'll never have resolve without accountability. And when there's no accountability, there'll always be just blame. And so I think a lot of times when we deal with church hurt, we want to blame it on them, but have no self-accountability for what we've done, right? Or not even what we've done, how we've managed it. Or were we good shepherds over the situation, you know? And I don't think in all cases, it's this made up thing, right? So a lot of people that have been hurt, it's not really church hurt, it's really finish hurt, but they don't know the difference.
Or in
So
the
how
words
many
of
times
what
a shepherd,
Patrick Juba said, maybe they were just hurt at church, but they wasn't hurt by the church.
right? But I think what I've done is I've taken greater stance on shepherding my people, right? And here it is. Another thing I started doing is I stopped pastoring them and started discipling them. And when you disciple them, you handle them differently. When you pastor them from a broad brush that we've always been taught. But when you disciple them, you handle them differently, you hear them differently, and you love them differently. But I don't want to start off with the whole it's the people's fault thing. Because if we have people watching us, and so if the whole narrative is them and not us, right? Then they're just gonna feel justified and inflamed with how they feel. Because I think, now watch this, I'll say it out loud. I think in some cases that the church hurt did come from the shepherd, right? Or I think a lot of
And
the
you
church
said
hurt,
last
if it
week
wasn't-
that you even said last week that you were guilty of hurting sheep.
Oh, yes, I'm guilty, right? And so now, forevermore, when a person joins my ministry, I don't get excited because they came. I automatically think about how many I would have had if I wouldn't have hurt the last ones. And the dangerous side of that is, how many people are you responsible for not just giving up on church, but giving up on God? And so I think church hurt is serious and shouldn't be anything that we just sweep under the rug like, well, it's a reason why they're hurt, right? Like a doctor don't be like, show up to work and be like surprised that you're sick, you know? Like, of course they're hurt. You know, of course they're wounded. Of course they're broken. That's why they need a shepherd. And so I just think that our angle tonight should be more about solution and not about blame.
Okay.
Because I want to see how we can prevent people from being hurt and how we can manage their hurt. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I have some questions along those lines because that's where my head was. All right, Derek.
First, I would just like to thank Pastor Jones for that. I agree wholeheartedly. with the words that you have just stated. But to go back to, I guess, what the original question was, I think I would agree with Bishop Foreman in that you would have to hear about the situation before you could give any kind of prognosis, because I think the truth is that everybody's going to get hurt in any kind of relationship you have, whether that's in church or just a romantic relationship, friendship, what have you. You're going to be hurt,
Right.
and I think one of I think that some of the best relationships happen after you've been hurt and you can move past it. So I thank God that I have friends who are also my advisors. So so sometimes when I have been hurt by church, I could talk to somebody that could talk me through it, work me through it, and help me to see that this is not a time for you to run. Because if you run from every hurt, you never learn you never grow up, you never mature.
I agree.
So I think there's a word to be said about that as well. So yeah, I think it's totally subjective. It just depends on the situation and what happened.
All right, Q.
Yeah, to go back to the base of your question, what I do in those situations, and of course my my answer is probably I'm pretty sure it's going to be different than a lot of the pastors that's on here, because I'm not under the same obligation I'm not a shepherd. So I'll straight out ask you what happened. Someone say, okay, tell me what happened, and don't sugarcoat. And I'll put the first foot forward to, what was it? It was money. It was sex. It was respect. What happened? Tell me. It's usually one of those things. It was some inappropriate sexual thing, some issue with money, or it was something where you didn't get the respect that you feel. And in other cases, it could be other things, but those are usually the main things. So tell me what it is. Once I find out once you tell me the real story, then I can find out where you should be accountable, where that church should be accountable, because I'm just going to give you an honest assessment. In some situations, you probably need to leave that church. In other situations, well, you seem like you kind of knew what was going on. Why didn't you make a different choice? In other situations, well, I want you to look at this in a different manner. I want you to see it from this perspective. Moving forward, how can you operate in a different way to where you're not hurt and you don't hurt other people? And also some of these other people who are involved in this situation, what do you think your actions may have done to them? So anything that happens, I try to get people to see from a wide range, the totality of it, so that they can make the proper decision moving forward, and they're not continuing to get hurt. They're not continuing to be in an environment that will hurt them, and they're not continuing to be poisonous within that ministry that they're in. Because some people, if you don't help them properly, they become that poison that turns around and spoils the rest of the bunch. So, those, because as the whole thing overall, I don't care who's the victim, because in one issue, everybody's going to be the victim at some point in time. But how do we get you to move forward in the best way possible so that you can be a better you? That's the advice that I would give to somebody.
All right, Bishop Foreman, we had a question come in from Facebook. I agree with Pastor E. My question in my heart was, what if the man of God was the one that hurt or wounded someone? Would he take accountability? If you were the person that wounded somebody, or and their perception that they were wounded by you, they tell you, Bishop Foreman, you hurt me. How do you address that?
Great question. So life and love are contact sports. You're going to take hits if you're playing it well. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
I promise you, Apple has got to get their stuff together. This ain't gonna work. Listen, I'm gonna cross over to the dark side.
Never that.
Don't you do that. That's the devil is a lie.
Listen, but then, I thought y'all was praying, man. Pray for me. So listen. So here's the thing: life and love are a contact sport. You are going to take hits if you play it well. So at the end of the day, hurt is something that's inevitable. Hurt is something that's going to happen. Hurt is something that you're going to deal with. And so hurt simply means that you were operating in life and you were operating in love. That being said, if somebody comes to me and says, Bishop, you hurt me. Again, I'm going to ask the question, well, explain that to me. Show me that. Explain that. And here's the simple thing: if that's the case, one, I think it's prudent of everyone to always apologize wherever there is a perception of something. You don't lose by being apologetic. I don't think there's anything to lose there other than a sense of pride. But then you deal with the facts of the matter. And the facts of the matter may be, I didn't hurt you. What was hurt was this, or, whatever the facts of that situation are. And if it's legit, then you certainly apologize for it. But there's nothing wrong with apologizing for a perception of something. And then you deal with the facts of the matter. You address it and you handle it. I think one of the things I love that both Derek and Q said is that think of a marriage. In a marriage, if every time you're hurt, you want a divorce, you don't have a marriage. That's not a marriage. That's no relationship. So I think you got to look at that in the same way as it relates to if you're interacting with church and you love your pastor, and you love your church, and you love your man of God. Well, why is it that if you got a problem, the first thing you want is a divorce? You got to have communication.
That's an interesting perspective. Very, very interesting.
Love it.
Even if you got an issue amongst another member, because let's be clear, the church can't hurt anybody. The church is an institution. The church can't hurt anybody. The people can do all types of things, but people hurt you on your job. And guess what? You didn't get a divorce from your job. You got a car accident and you are driving home right now, or you drove there, you're going. So hurt is a part of life. I love what you said. You got to learn how to deal with it. And I think the danger, you can heal from it or you can manage it, but those are two different types of medication. And too often in life, we have learned to manage pain and not actually heal from pain. So consequently, you become addicted to drugs that help you numb the reality of what's going on, but you never actually solve the reason that you felt that way in the first place.
Bishop Thomas.
Well, I want to go back. I definitely agree with Bishop Foreman, and I appreciate what Pastor Eric said as well. But I think we started at that point where we were talking about hurt on both sides. One of the things I think we cannot do, and that's why I appreciate you running this back for a second week, you can't ever rush to solution without understanding problem. If you don't clearly understand a problem, that's where Bishop said you go to managing situations. Like people will be on blood pressure medicine for years and they managing the blood pressure, but they don't start eating right. They don't start exercising. It's irresponsible for a doctor to diagnose you or to just go to writing prescriptions without making an accurate diagnosis of what's really going on with you. And for pastors, as far as being the institutors, of hurt, they implement the hurt at times. It's the same thing. As I said at the very beginning, both sides are dealing with hurt. The pastor does not have as easy of a divorce opt-out as the person does. And so there has to be a relationship built. But then I think this is where pastors have to go back to some form of connection and accountability themselves with other people other than just themselves. You can't be the final say-so in every situation, because if you do, then you never come up with a real solution to any problem.
Pastor Freeman, I was trying to get you to be a part of this conversation, Pastor Freeman.
I know. That's why I laughed, bro. That's why I laughed. He over there bucket. He was the first choice.
So really, what we're kind of winding this down to from just kind of a move forward thing is really about having communication. And I like that, Elder Ridley. You're talking about it's really about having conversation. It's about being honest, being real, and also on some level being exposed so that we can really get to the meat of what this is all about. Okay. So understanding that, if we have a real situation where somebody feels this, I want us to concentrate on the idea that maybe there could be other things. Would it be fair to say that sometimes the infliction of this pain, this hurt, might not be because you physically did? Derek last week talked about somebody that was getting a butt whooped, like for real, whooped an adult with a belt in the church. That's a whole nother kind of thing. then you got these, mind games and all of this kind of stuff. But what about when there is real, like, preferential treatment or access to leadership that other folks don't have? Isn't that a reality of sometimes where people, oh, I don't want to go there, I don't want to be a part of that, I can't ever talk to my pastor, I can't ever be with him? I mean, aren't we real that sometimes some of that happens?
Yeah, but you need to grow up. That shouldn't be church hurt, though.
Yeah, because that goes back to misplaced
But that's
expectations.
kind of what my point right there. That's really what my point is. My point right there is, but that's what gets in this laundry list. And that's why I wanted to start with trying to make some real definitive definition, because you start putting all of this other stuff. But I'm going to tell you, I guarantee you tell somebody you need to grow up, and they're going to feel like you are part of the problem. You are perpetuating that hurt. Bishop Foreman said something really good. He talked about managing, and I love what Jones had to say about this idea of were you hurt or were you injured? Because if you injured, you can't play no more. But if you're hurt, we can work with the hurt. We can put a wrap around your leg. We can put a wrap around your arm. We can put some compression on it and get you loosened up, put some ice or some icy hot, put the heat on it. We can do something to get you where you can get back in the game. Too many times, folks who say, I've been hurt, they quit the game. And that's what we have to stop doing, is acknowledging people who quit the game for no reason at all.
Well, Bishop, simply, I think you should. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But we also have to be sensitive to when stuff is real. What were you gonna say, Q?
Just along with that, I think for the person or the member, you shouldn't have any other expectation outside of what you have in a relationship. Now, if you jump out of a relationship every time anything happens wrong, which you find some people who do that, then well, okay, that's what you expect. But if you're willing to learn and grow together in a real relationship, then you shouldn't have different expectations of a church than you do in a relationship or at your job. Now, even in relationships, certain things can become toxic, certain things can become abusive, and in those situations, yeah, you probably need to get up and run, but don't have different expectations that you would allow in one aspect, but then you don't allow them in the other. That's all I was gonna say.
All right, Bishop.
I think that it might be what might be problematic is the word relationship. When we use that, lines get skewed, because nobody goes to Dell Computer and be mad that they can't hang out with Michael Dell. I mean, I think when we use the term relationship, it entitles us to something more than just coming for fellowship, coming to hear the word, or coming to get fed. And that's where the misplaced expectations come in, because even as a pastor, when I've allowed lines to get skewed and get into more relationship than fellowship with people, it ended up with either me hurt or me hurting somebody, and I think maybe that word, because when we associate relationship with something, we associate access that may not, like when I go to work on my job, I don't, when you go to work on your job, you don't feel, I done lost y'all. Ever lost you?
We have.
Oh, I can't see everybody else, but you don't feel like you get to hang out with the boss. You go to work for the purpose of getting paid to take care of your family. If that thing evolves into something more personal over time, then you do that. But you don't go to work to your job saying, I'm gonna be real cool with my boss.
I wasn't talking directly about just pastor to member, but even people in the church, whether it's family, no matter what it is, you have a relationship with the church. So whether it's
I understood what you were saying.
Okay,
we were talking about how we were going to start fixing something, and I think that word, because when people get in inappropriate relationships in church and they break up, who are they mad at? They mad at the church because that's where they met them at. And
that reminds me of what Bishop Foreman said, though. It's you are correct, but will people ever see it anything other than, will people look at it the way, no matter how much you teach it like that, will people look at it any differently than this is a relationship? That's a question. I don't know.
I think they're capable of it because they do it on their jobs every day. We just don't define the lines enough, like going into any situation, understanding, it does a lot of things to eliminate a lot of tension and stuff if you got an understanding, going in. So I just think maybe that word might be at the foundation of some of our issues.
And I'm gonna get to you, Derek. I want to share something that Pastor Freeman said. He said, I'm gonna be 100. Negroes cry church hurt and are able to church hop because there are too many of us, meaning pastors, that will receive that and grow our ministries off of trash from somebody else's.
Good point. Good point.
Okay, can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
We can hear you.
Look, I got off of this thing. Jesus. So
I can't hear him.
Hey,
you can hear me.
I can hear you fine.
yes, come on.
Sorry.
So here's the thing. One, the pastor's statement about people attracting hurt people is certainly a reality. But again, the same thing is true in life. There are people who literally look for damaged goods and build their lives around that, and they go from relationship to relationship. So there's certainly a reality to that. And that is the course of life. At the end of the day, that's just c'est la vie, the French say. But to go back to this point of dealing with relationship, I think you can communicate clearly, you can set clear expectations, but here's the reality we all have to come through. Sometimes certain things just aren't a fit. And what your expectation is may not be something I can deliver. And guess what? Right. This is not a fit. We do not have a path forward. What you want, I can't deliver, or vice versa. And I think the reality is being okay with that, because I think what ends up happening where people get all convoluted is that the thought is, I'm going to force what I want to be what you want and vice versa. So this is what I want, so this needs to be what you want and vice versa. And sometimes you just have to be mature enough to say, this is not a fit in relationships and in church, to say, you know what you want, going back to Bishop Thomas's point, what you want from your pastor is not something I can deliver. So you know, be encouraged. Be encouraged. Sometimes remember, you got to understand the same thing. If what I want is not something that's able to be delivered, you just have to be okay with that. And that's just a sign of maturity, not just in church, but in life. Because the same things that happen in life happen in church.
Pastor Jones, before Derek, Pastor Jones, I want you to jump in on that.
Okay, I can't jump in. I didn't hear a word he said.
Okay, then I'll come back to you. Derek, come on, Derek.
I just wanted to say, because I agree, but just to add a bit of balance, I would say that as leaders, any type of leader, if a person is getting hurt for any reason, I feel like we should do some type of self-check. We should check ourselves to just see what we could have done differently, if there is anything we could do differently. Because if a person, because you guys were sort of talking about people being offended by the hierarchy in church or by the lack of a relationship and that kind of stuff. So if that happens consistently, that may be a problem. And then, so rather than just allow people to leave because that's a problem, maybe as a good leader, you should look at, is this really a problem? Or perhaps we can do something so that these people won't be offended and won't leave our church. Secondly, I feel like we should be careful. Now, I agree, but I just think we should be careful to compare the church and pastors with Michael Dell and the likes of those things, because you're not Michael Dell and you're not running a company. You are pastoring a church. If you want to be Michael Dell and not have people come talk to you and all that kind of stuff, then maybe you need to go, be a CEO, not pastor the church. The only reason why I say that, because again, now I'm throwing that out there to provide balance, because I agree and I understand all these things. But the reason why I'm saying that is because people do have different expectations for churches. And so kind of going with what Bishop Foreman said, if that's going to be you, like if your thing is, I'm untouchable and I only want whatever, whatever the scenario is, then let that be you. And but understand that there's a part of society that's not going to gravitate to that. But let's just be careful, I think, in our comparisons of the church to other things, because when people come to church, they have a different expectation.
Listen, I know. I saw you raise your hand, so
I'm being provocative on purpose.
Right, real quick. So one, a self-assessment is what any mature person does. So I completely agree with you on that, because sometimes there are policies, procedures, things that do need to change. I do want to be clear. Everyone that leaves is not a loss. Let me be very clear.
Yeah.
Everyone that leaves your life is not a loss. Just because someone is absent, cancer grows too. So growth doesn't necessarily mean that you got to be careful of what's actually growing. So just to be clear about that, because sometimes people will attack the wrong thing in an effort to fix something that's not actually a problem. So in church, in life, in business, in ministry, everyone that departs does not mean that there's a loss. That's number one. Number two, when it comes to a church absolutely has an administrative and a business aspect to it. And I know
Amen.
you weren't.
Amen.
I know you weren't taking away from that. I think the reality is it goes back to expectations. If a person wants to, have that type of close-knit, tight relationship with their pastor, if that's the way that's set up, then certainly there's things. I'm a people person, so I'm a hands-on shepherd. I love to interact with those that I lead. I also realize that if that things have to be handled and business has to be handled well, because at the end of the day, things still have to be taken care of. And so I think the reality there is to make sure that it goes back to expectation. If a person wants something that pastor is unable to deliver, then that conversation has to certainly ensue. But it goes back to expectations, because everybody's going to be different.
Could I just say, just so you understand my perspective, is that the reason why I said that is because it's not in my nature. The people who know me know that I'm not a very warm person when it comes to embracing people and that kind of stuff.
That's me.
And so it took someone, a mentor.
I'm sorry, I'm reading comments.
A mentor had to tell me, hey, it's not about you. You're in ministry, and that these people just want to hug. They just want to talk to you. And part of being successful in this ministry is you're going to have to learn how to meet them halfway, at least. And I thank God for that, because even though that's not me and that's not my personality, I learned how to sort of meet people halfway so I could be successful.
Well,
Because it doesn't take much.
And I think that's different, Derek, than going beyond the lines into the personal realm. There's a difference in loving people, embracing people, talking to people. But then when that personal line is crossed, where, life gets beyond the line that needs to be, where they can't receive from you anymore, you're not helping them when you allow it to go beyond that personal, nor are you helping yourself, because you expose yourself to stuff that you can't reel back in. And a lot of people have lost ground with pastors only because they saw them with their armor off and they lost respect for them.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
I'm
not the kind of person. Let me just say this. I'm the kind of person that I don't want to be friends with my pastor. I want to always see you as pastor and only as pastor. I don't want to go out to eat with you. I don't want to go to the movies with you. I just want you to be my pastor.
Right.
All right. Good. Eric, Pastor Jones, sorry.
Okay, so, and I'm Eric. Matter of fact, that's part of my comment. I'm Eric, right? And so what happened is, when I first started pastoring, I had to be what I was taught, right? I had to be what I seen other people do, right? And then sooner or later, that got uncomfortable to me. Now, I did also learn that being too transparent will get you hurt, right?
Absolutely.
So now this year, that's my word. My members know it. My word is boundaries. However, even with boundaries, I still want to be Eric, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm gonna get in trouble when I say this, but hey, it's cool. I don't care. One of my members just said it best, right? They expect their pastor to be Superman, and then when they find out that he's Clark Kent, they get hurt, right?
Yeah.
And I tell them all the time, right? I don't want nobody putting me on no pedestal.
My pastor is Superman.
Okay. Pedestals never determine how high you are. Pedestals will only determine how far you fall, right? And so, and the reason why I'm transparent is it's so bad, y'all. You literally got to be unbiblical to be a pastor, right? So what I mean by that is, I tell my people, oh Lord, this is gonna get me in trouble, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I tell my people all the time, if somebody said they seen your pastor at the store buying a beer, you tell them y'all lying. My pastor buy them 6 at a time, right? Because I don't want nobody to come on my house looking for a bottle of water and look at my refrigerator and be like, Huh?
Do
Yeah,
preachers
you
drink beer?
know.
Really,
Right,
man?
so, no,
I don't drink no beer. I don't drink no beer.
but my point is, it's so uncomfortable not being yourself. You know what I mean? And so I just believe that some people will find a reason to get hurt, right? Some people will find a reason to. I mean, like I had one that no matter what I did, it was never good enough, right? Derek Locke came to preach in my church. He said the Bible says that your job is to go after the one that was lost, not the one that left. Right? So what I stopped doing is I started chasing members down. If they want to be hurt, right? It's funny that at my church, they hurt and they bleeding, but when they go to the next church, they fine. You know, so I don't chase them down. I just think some of them are just who they are, but I will not ever again pastor being uncomfortable. I'll never, I mean, you know, meaning you got to watch everything you do, everything you say. You know, they're offended by something I say, but they cuss in the sanctuary. Like what? You know? And so I think there's a line. Like you hold your pastor to so much that you know that you forget that but I tell my name is Eric Jones. And I was I'm like a dude, like for real. I'm a dude. I'm a guy, right? And so don't never hold me to such an esteem that you expect perfection out of me, that you expect me never to fail, never to fall, never to have human moments, because I'm gonna have human moments. And if me being a human, right, impacts you negatively or causes you to be hurt or causes you to be disappointed, I mean, they're so big. Like, bro, like leave, cool. And I tell people, and listen to me when I say this, right? It's God's church by ownership, mine by stewardship. I don't believe in the philosophy that you can't tell people to leave your church. Yes, you can, right? If people are disrupting at your church, I welcome them to leave. I've had two that already told to leave, right? But at the same time, when you hold them accountable for their jump, in the same manner, are they going to hold you accountable? And sometimes, as pastor, hell, I get tired of being the victim.
All right.
I get tired of everybody always jumping on me.
Q, so what is this? Bishop Foreman used the phrase. I like the phrase Bishop Foreman, Bishop Thomas, I'm sorry, used the phrase. I like the phrase. The phrase he said is that they see you with your armor off. Isn't
That was dope.
Isn't that, do you want to know your pastor with his armor off? Can you keep who he is and what he does in perspective? Derek said, I don't want to be close to my pastor. Can you keep who he is and what he does in perspective? Or do you want to have that veil, that wall there?
Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I prefer to have the wall. It's ignorance is bliss, and it's better to just sit back and be able to hear the word without knowing everything that goes on in the back room. Now, let me give you a disclaimer. I am the son of a preacher. My dad has been pastoring for over 30 years, so I have no desire to be close to any men of God because I've already, my father was one, and I've seen all of them, and there's nothing glamorous about it behind closed doors, if you want to be honest. Not even from a them being people standpoint, you know, just them being human beings, but also what they have to deal with in order to keep ministry moving. That's God is verbally going to have to come down and speak to me if I ever become a pastor or something like that, because I don't want it. I've seen it all my life. I don't want it. So to answer your question, if God calls you and tells you to do that, wonderful, but I wouldn't call it a desirable thing. I've never had it, and ironically, I think that's why God uses me the way that He does, because it's Moses' thing. When you don't want it, then that's when God kind of chooses you. But that's my answer.
Bishop Foreman, Elder Ridley said in her statement, keep your witness. You're a leader. You can always succumb to your weaknesses. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. Okay, so Pastor Jones said, you know what? I'm Eric. I'm who I am. If somebody come and say, hey, I saw your pastor buying a beer, you know they lying because I buy 6 at a time.
6 of them.
Is it okay for a pastor to be that exposed?
I think a pastor should be himself. Listen, can y'all can't hear me?
I
No,
can hear you.
I don't know what's going on.
It's just me.
Okay.
So I will say this: a pastor should be themselves. When you are yourself, 100% of the time, all the time, you are authentically you. I think that's just the way that everybody should be. It's very difficult to be a character because you have to remember when to go into character. And so that's how I live. That's how I pass. I am myself. And so at the end of the day, I love life. I love what I do. I love people. I have a good time and enjoy it all. But you should be yourself. And so, again, when you get into the specifics, I don't want to delve into the specifics of should a pastor do this or do that or do that or do that, because I think that's not the direction we need to go, especially with 5 minutes left. But a pastor should be themselves.
Oh my God, we only have 5 minutes left.
Right, we only have 5 minutes left. At the end of the day, a pastor should be themselves. And when you're yourself, you are free because you're not held hostage to anybody's perception of you or what anybody expects of you. This is me. What you see is what you get. And if you like that, let's go. If you don't, I understand that.
Bishop Thomas, a comment came in, a pastor has higher standards.
That's funny.
I mean, a parent has higher standards. You know what I'm saying? It's certain things, and again, this goes on the whole misplaced expectations. There are certain things I won't do around my children to this day, and they're grown, because again, I have to have a certain level of effectiveness with them that there's just certain, but again, that's just me. There were certain things my grandmother, I never heard my grandmother cuss. I'm sure she cussed. I just never heard her cuss. You know what I'm saying? So I think that with every territory, there goes a level of responsibility. And with the level of the pastor, in my opinion, I think that, yes, there is a level of higher expectation, whether it's fair or unfair, because sometimes, as Pastor Jones said, they put unfair expectations on us. They don't want us to be, even human. But I think if we can keep the lines at different times, listening to it from Q's perspective, and I know Q very well, he served me for years, and he's very capable of seeing you with your armor off and not losing regard. But I love the fact that he said, ignorance is bliss in that sense. I'd rather not have to fight what's going on in my head while I'm listening to what you're saying, because you've overexposed me to something. So,
and Bishop, just to deal with the comment, because you said you're comparing apples and oranges and all of that. Again, a pastor being themselves is a very different conversation than standard. Those are two different conversations, and the conversation we're having is a pastor being themselves. And yes, the pastor should be themselves because all people should. A conversation about what they should be doing and what they should practice, that's another question. So we just got to stay.
Well, and I think he asked that question, though. He was asking me, should we be held to a higher standard?
No,
and that's why I was saying sometimes the line gets skewed between being yourself and not holding a certain standard that is reasonable. Now, where Pastor Jones went into was areas that there are unreasonable standards put on us. Sure. But there are some standards that people expect of us that's reasonable, like standards my children expect of me that I'm sure is reasonable. So that's just my opinion.
Well, everybody,
but I know we got to go, right? I want to ask Bishop Thomas something. I know we got to go. Bishop Thomas,
Yes,
I was listening to Judge Karen Mills. I love Judge Karen Mills, right? People say when they're in court and they say, well, I didn't know, she always says lack of knowledge is not a defense, right?
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, how long should I be responsible for your lack of knowledge? Because a lot of people make judgments. A lot of people make judgments off of what they've been told, or watch this, what they simply assume without any biblical knowledge, right? So how long do I pay the price for your lack of knowledge? Now, my people are taught, right? Don't get it twisted. I'm not rolling down the street with my convertible top with a 40 in my hand. Don't get me twisted, right? so, and on top of that, I only go to certain stores. But my thing is,
because
but if you offended, right? Are you offended because you don't know?
Whoa.
Well, that's a great question, and I'm gonna answer it on behalf of one of my Garmathians, Dr. Lewis. But one is, you asked how long should you be responsible. Here's the reality of, and I mean just the pastors that are on this line. If people did not have lack of knowledge, we'd be unemployed.
Right,
so,
I get that.
the length of our employment is predicated on people's lack of knowledge. Now,
which is why I teach my people.
yeah, well, and that's who you're responsible for the most.
Right.
But and the Bible says that, we do have to be, just because all things are expedient, they ain't necessary. There are certain things I do that ain't gonna send me to hell or them to hell, but I just don't do them in front of them. And it's just, and again, it's based on, I think what Bishop said, your comfort zone. What you do, what you said, whether I like it or anybody else likes it or not, actually goes back to the very beginning. You are establishing clear expectations. Don't expect me to do something, so you come into the relationship.
I'm sorry, Roy, we gotta go. And this last comment by Sister Whitley is what I'm talking about, right? So my thing is, how do I ruin my witness? Because you ruined your study habits. Like everybody said, well, don't ruin your witness, right? I'm not ruining my witness. The Bible don't say I'm tripping. The biggest party known to mankind is when Jesus turned water into wine, right?
But if you know, but if you know that your liberty is going to cause somebody else to fall, I think you have a responsibility to not indulge in your liberty.
That's good, Derek.
Yeah, and I get that, Derek, right?
That's the point.
But if my causing you to fall, right, is because you refuse to educate yourself and know better. Like
they don't know better. That's why they need you.
Once again, that's why I teach my people.
Bishop Foreman, what were you saying?
But that's expectation.
I want to hear him. I can't hear him.
I'm a sign.
Right, exactly. I apologize. I don't mean to be offensive, but
that's what he said.
But in that, what I'm saying, if that's the expectation you have for those you lead, if they good with that, they good with that. Yeah. But somebody that says, I don't want my pastor going to the liquor store, getting done.
I'm agreeing. I don't know what he said.
Because this was the example he used. Then that's a different set of expectations. It's expectations. Let me be clear. As a leader, there comes with an implied higher expectation. It's implied. It comes with the job in every context. So at the end of the day, we should certainly uphold the standard of the Word of God, all at the same time being human. That being said, again, to Pastor's point, if that's how he chooses to operate and how he chooses to lead, to demonize that because it's different, I think is a fallacy. I think the reality is that's what he chooses to do. He's setting an expectation. That's the expectation he sets, and that's why you have Popeyes, KFC, and churches. Churches. Yeah. You got options because at the end of the day, it's different, and we need a part 3.
All right,
Bishop Wright.
So
Bishop Wright. Bishop Wright. I have a quick question for you. Did you just get a quickening over churches?
That's gross. Churches is gross.
No, wait a minute. What Derek just did is my point.
I bet whatever Bishop Porter said was
Derek just did is my point. Derek said that's gross. To him, right. Like churches. Derek, by the way, I don't like churches either.
Thank you.
That's exactly the point.
Y'all don't have to like churches.
Right.
It don't matter if you like it or not. Okay, so guys, I'm telling you, this is transitioning exactly how I wanted it to, because I want to talk about church. Will y'all come back next week?
Yes.
Only
all day, every day.
All right.
Only Pastor
Freeman. All right. Hey guys, part 3.
Yeah, Pastor Freeman, you gotta be on.
Tell all your friends, tell all your people them. We doing some part 3 next week. All right. See y'all later. Thank you.
Jones, this ain't Miller Lite. This ain't Miller.
Get out.
I'm messing with you, bud.
Bye, guys.
All right.